Welcome to Cravings Control for Fat Loss. I'm your host, Laura Cavallo, former sugar binger, overeater, and yo-yo dieter turned fat loss and cravings coach for hundreds of busy women. Here at Cravings Control for Fat Loss, I'll be sharing mindset, movement, and metabolism strategies for those who are ready to ditch the fat diet cycle and slim down without counting calories, tracking points, or giving up any of the foods they love. Get ready to embrace progress over perfection, grace over guilt, and bring curiosity and learning to the inevitable ups and downs of your life. Expect a decrease in your cravings while seeing and feeling an improvement in how you look, how you feel, and your overall quality of life. I am so excited you're here, boo. Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of Cravings Control for Fat Loss. My name is Laura Cavallo, your cravings coach, and today I have a very special guest with us. Molly Buster is on the podcast. Molly Buster is an online health and fitness coach based in Kansas with over 11 years in the fitness industry. With a personal background in dance and Olympic weightlifting, she specializes in teaching women how to strength train while incorporating nutritional education. One of her core coaching values is that long-term change only comes from implementing strategies that are manageable, doable, and sustainable. Molly launched her own business, Molly Buster Coaching, in December 2020 to be more mobile and work with clients under her own value system and direction. You can find Molly Buster at Molly Buster Coaching on Instagram, and you can email her at molly@mollybuster.com. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Today, I am here with a very dear friend who I've known for almost 10 years. I'm welcoming Molly Buster to the podcast. Hi, Molly.
Hi.
I'm excited to have you on. I can't wait to share our story with the world and with our audience. So Molly and I met when I first got hired at Equinox, and she was working the front desk, and I was like trying to find friends, and I was like, hi, I'm Laura. And then we totally bonded and connected. So Molly is currently in the Midwest and had just moved to LA, but I'm going to let her tell you about that. So hi, Molly.
Hi.
Tell us about where you're from, how you grew up, and kind of what your childhood experience was as it relates to food, fitness, and nutrition, and how that's kind of reflected in your upbringing.
I grew up in Madison, Kansas, which is where I live now. But when I was growing up, it was about 800 people. And I grew up on a farm in a farm family. And so I think a lot of our nutrition and movement, it really came from that farm mentality. It was a lot of meat and potatoes, like in terms of what we were eating. Food was a love language for my mom's side of the family for sure. And my parents don't work out, right? My dad does manual labor for a living. So he's moving us, and that's kind of like that hard work mentality. So it's a lot of hard work and a lot of food for love and comfort. And I think too, like growing up with my mom specifically, I'll talk a little bit more about her, like nothing was ever restricted from us. Like we never had any restrictive, like you shouldn't eat that. There was none of that. But most of the women on my mom's side of the family were overweight. And so there was like dieting that would happen like for them, but it was never projected onto us. But it's something that you saw a lot and something that they were very self-conscious about, I think, as well, their own bodies and their own weight, and something they were trying to work on. So I feel like that's the stuff that was like modeled a lot. But I grew up super active, played a bunch of sports. In small towns, you would kind of play everything, which was like super fun. But yeah, that was kind of the food and fitness vibe of growing up here in a small community.
Yeah, I remember when we first met and you said that your town has only one stoplight in it. One
sign? Like,
one stop sign?
No stoplights in my town. In our county, there's one. Yeah.
Yeah. And that you had 5 people in your whole graduating class, which
16.
is 16. Oh, okay. Which is insane because we had almost 400.
Right. So very, very small and community. So it was great in a lot of ways. And I didn't know any different at the time.
Until you moved to LA, and then we'll talk about that transition too. But I think that there's definitely something to be said about like the type of work that your family did, and just showing like that you're getting up in the morning, you're feeding the cows, you're moving, you're working on the farm. Like your dad also owned a shop, right? Like a mechanic shop. And so constantly working with his hands. And so there is definitely like what we talk about now, like non-exercise related activity, like just moving your body and doing things that you enjoy. And I'm sure that you picked up some of that from just being on the farm and being with your family and helping out as like a young
Yeah,
kid too. You were always outside doing something.
100%. And I feel like that, yeah, the hard work mentality is definitely something that culturally here is high. And also
Mm-hmm.
just in my coming from a generational blue collar family, I've been talking, came up with a client, it's also come up with a friend, but like, it's where you kind of almost associate working hard with like being a good person, like it's like you attach morality to like working hard.
Yes. I just was having this conversation with my mom yesterday is like, I wish that instead of learning how to work hard, I learned how to work smarter almost like as a
Sure.
kid.
Yes.
But same with our family. Like my grandparents immigrated here from Italy and my grandma was a seamstress. My grandfather was a construction worker. My dad was a construction worker. Like it was wake up and work hard to earn a living. And I think in some ways, like also prove yourself as an immigrant in the States that you could
Yeah.
contribute to the economy and the community of the United States. So growing up, there wasn't a lot of talk. Like the only sort of the thing that you remember the most, I guess, around nutrition was that there was nothing really restricted. Food was comfort and love. And if someone was sort of talking about healthy eating, it was more in the way of dieting, or was there any discussion around like this is good food or this is bad food, or was there any sort of like stigma attached to anything as you were growing up?
No. And as I understand, I think that maybe there was more of that kind of restriction in my mom's childhood. And I think it was super important to her that we never feel that. So
Mm-hmm.
there was, along with not making us feel bad about anything we're eating, there was not also any like education around food either. And I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
she didn't really. I mean, we know working with individuals all the time, people don't know. Like
Yeah.
really, like people
Right.
don't know about nutrition really. And so I mean, I definitely remember like stretches where I ate ice cream like every night. Like just go
Mm-hmm.
get a bowl of ice cream and go sit on the couch with my parents.
Mm-hmm.
Like never said a word. Like so and on one hand I feel like that was really good. On the other hand, we only ever knew how to celebrate something with food. It became very emotional. Oh, you had a concert? Let's go get ice cream. Oh, you're having a bad day? Let's make something yummy. Like it's just like that's how you handled any situation, good or bad. And so I think when I got to college, and even I was working on it even in LA. I mean, we know those transitions are hard. Like reframing my mind that like food is not the answer. Like
Mm-hmm.
food is what like helps continue life. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't need to be attached to so many emotions all the time.
Yeah. I think your experience isn't just reserved for the Midwest, obviously, in terms of the education of knowing what's healthy and what's not, and food as an emotional tool. So you grew up as a dancer and you majored in dance. And
Hmm.
so you touched on it, or you mentioned it rather, going into college and starting to change your relationship with food a little bit. Can you tell us about what that looked like for you and your relationship with food and exercise as a
Hmm.
dancer as you got older?
Yeah, and there was a shift that happened for me in college too. So I would say I was lucky that the college I went to was not super strict on body size, which like some dance, I mean, a lot of them have come away from that, but like there were colleges still doing weigh-ins and stuff like that. Like my college was not about that. They were very body inclusive and had a lot of the emphasis on ability. So if you have the ability, we don't care the size. Now, there was some pressure in the sense that you stare at yourself in a mirror for about 12 hours a day during dance class.
Right. Right.
So even if your teachers aren't giving you a ton of external pressure necessarily, you're giving it to yourself. And
Mm,
so there was this secular pattern because I was still working on my emotional eating where like you would food prep and eat clean all week long. And then you'd have chips and salsa and ice cream and then weigh yourself like you do, which we know you
hmm
shouldn't do now, right? After you've had salt and sugar and alcohol and all of that. And then I would like cry Monday or Sunday typically. And then I would go back to class and we would rinse and repeat this like cycle. And my husband, who was my probably boyfriend at the time, bless him, was like, if we're going to do this cycle where you cry every Monday or whatever, we're not going to eat ice cream this weekend.
hmm
Like essentially, and it was just like an aha moment and sense where he was like, we can change what we're doing so that you're
mm,
happier. And I'm like,
hmm
oh, so that was that. There was that. And I really called light that I needed to change my relationship with food, like to
hmm
me. And
Yeah.
then I found a dance company that had a lot more, it was very much strength based. So the women, there was a strength test to get in, women and men caught each other. And I felt like that was like coming from an athletic background, that was a shift I needed. And like from that
Mm,
moment, then I started chasing being stronger, getting this skill set, and trying to change my relationship with food. And that was probably my junior year of college. And
Wow.
that kind of made that transition into like
Yeah.
the time I would have been moving to LA.
I have the chills hearing that, because you don't hear a lot of dance companies prioritizing strength or athleticism. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, yes, but in my mind, I'm thinking like ballet or
Yeah.
something. And obviously, I'm not that educated on dance genres and things like that. But, for a company or even like your college to be not doing weigh-ins, I think that's a huge step forward. Prioritizing strength and doing strength tests, I think it just puts the focus on other parts of like what you're able to contribute
Yeah.
to the dance company and your performance. So I think that's really valuable.
It was a really good shift. And I just felt like because of the sports and stuff I had done growing up, and I didn't take a lot of technical dance before going to college because of where I grew up as well. I did a lot of show choir and music theater, but I didn't take ballet class and things like that. And I just really felt like that was the place for me. Like once this company, like we had a girl that had graduated, she came back. Once I saw what they were capable, I was like, that's where all this fits together. I didn't know how it was all going to fit together. I think before that, like I like dancing, I like performing, but I didn't know how my strengths and my body shape, since I am thicker, more athletic, generally just more muscular genetically, like I was like, I don't know how this is going to fit in.
Right. Can I be a dancer? Right. Is
Right.
this the path for me? Does this make sense?
100%.
Is there a spot for me? So this more strength and athletic focused dance company, is that the company you transferred to LA for?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So tell us about that. So you're in college and then you kind of had to decide what the next steps were and what prompted you to make that leap.
I was like kind of, before I found this company, I figured I would go to Las Vegas or LA because like you can't dance in the Midwest. And I honestly, no offense, had no desire to go to New York. And so I knew it wasn't going to be there. And once I found this company, I had went out, I had done a couple, they call them intensives, where you go out, you spend a week with a company and some other prospective people. But at the end of the summer, they still kind of offered me a job. And I was like, well, I can't dance here, so I'm moving anyways. And so we moved to LA, and then a month later, they offered me a job.
Oh, nice.
They called me. So I kind of jumped. I was like, it'll come through.
Yeah.
It'll come through.
I'll figure it out.
That's kind of when, I had known one of the personal training managers at Equinox. I had worked front desk all through college and asked if I could have a job. And the week I moved there, I went in and they hired me for front desk. So that was supposed to be, Equinox was always supposed to be my side gig while I was dancing. And over time, that obviously shifted, as we know, and I kind of went more to the personal training route. But that's my initial transition. And I did work for that company for about 2 years before I just really fell in love with personal training. And I was kind of dreading going to rehearsal and super excited to go to the gym. And I was like, okay, things have shifted here, and that's okay.
Yeah, I remember that like period of time where you were really torn. You're like, this has been my life for so long, and I went to school for it, and I moved here for it, but I'm finding so much purpose with what I'm doing and still being able to work with women and kind of in a team environment at some points, within
definitely.
Equinox. Well, how did you know? Well, you said it, like I was dreading going to dance class, but like excited to be a trainer. What really solidified it for you? Was there anything, like any questions you asked yourself or anything that was like, okay, yeah, this is the route I have to go?
I think there was that element where like, what is really giving me joy here? And like the more of those interactions I had where like, I wasn't really enjoying rehearsal or the performance or something like that and really thriving in my work environment, there was a lot of that. And the more that those happened, the more I was able to like, okay, we're imbalanced here. But I think also, and this is like, I have a lot of friends still in the performing arts world, but I will say, particularly in LA, like when you think about the price tag of Los Angeles, like the starving artist situation is also very real. Like you're working multiple jobs to pay rent, and you probably will be for a while. And I was just thinking about, because I was married, and I was like thinking about Josh and I's life, and I'm like, in 7 years, is this still like the lifestyle that I want or that we want to build? And so I think it was like multifold. Like I could see my future like thriving in personal training, and I was enjoying it so much, where I was having a hard time like being like, what is this what is my dance career going to look like at 30 really? And is it going to
Mm-hmm.
bring me the joy that I think it's going to? And I
Mm-hmm.
ultimately felt like the answer was no.
Oh, wow. That's powerful. That's powerful. Like thinking you're going to do something and then the course changes, but also being able to find some like comfort in those signs and that intuition and those gut instincts that were coming through. I think it's really helpful.
Yeah. And I think it's hard. And not to say that if anyone is, going through a transition like that, like I had a lot of, I would say almost like grief of like letting go of like the career I thought I was going to be having. Like,
Yeah.
even though I knew it wasn't the right thing for me anymore, it didn't make leaving it less sad.
Yeah, totally. So you're a full-time trainer at Equinox. Tell me about your, I guess, evolution as a coach. And, this might take a
Mhm.
little while because you've been a coach for over 10 years,
Yeah, I
but
was thinking about that. Like, the more people ask you about your bio, I'm like, oh, this is getting long. Like, I'm
yeah,
like, now we've been doing this. Like, yeah.
this is gonna get long. So I guess let's talk about your time at Equinox in Santa Monica. You started doing a lot of Olympic lifting,
Mhm.
strength training. Then you yourself went into competition. You're still working with women in strength training. So I guess share a little bit about your own journey in terms of health and fitness. Initially, what were your goals in fitness? Was it to get stronger? Was it to get faster? And then kind of what has it become now and where are you at now?
Yeah. So I think a lot of my early time at Equinox, which I'm sure you can relate to, I think again, I think a lot of it's internal. I mean, pressure. I don't want to say anyone was ever like, but but like you feel like you need to look the part. Also, we're living in Los Angeles. There's tons of beautiful people, and so I think and I was still dancing my first 2 years I was there. So I think in the beginning I was still in that like trying to have a better relationship with food and learning a lot about nutrition in our time there, but still feeling like my goal was to be leaner and look better in a swimsuit. Probably
Hmm.
like that whole time, which like we know can only generate so much joy
Yeah. Yeah.
and frustration, equal
Yeah.
frustration. So I would say that was definitely pushing. And I think that was the stimulus and I have always, because my high school did have a strength program. I did grow up lifting weights too, which was nice because then I felt a lot more comfortable in that realm. And so I felt like I was learning to lift more, lift heavier, working on technique. But I think that really was the stimulus also with like my eating and the way I was training of why I started competing in Olympic lifting in the first place. I was like, the swimsuit goal is not doing it for me anymore. Like it's
Hmm.
not enough. It's having a negative impact, and I need my focus to be something else, and also just to motivate my training. I was kind of feeling like, bleh. And so it was actually between that or a CrossFit competition, and I ended up going on to the Olympic weightlifting. And I think for me it was technique based, which means you suck, and wanting to be better like is what makes you come back to like the
Right.
next training cycle. Also, you're on a long program, so every training has a lot of validity. If I don't do my session today, like I literally can't do the numbers that are on next week. Like, so
Right.
it had a lot of accountability built in.
Hmm.
And then I just got like super strong. And I was like,
Yeah.
this is awesome. And so I
Yeah.
competed again. I kept competing for about 2.5 years after that. But I feel like that shift really helped me put emphasis on something that wasn't attached to body fat percent. Now, to say that that wasn't in my mind at all, like, no, of course it was. But I was just in a much healthier place. I was focusing on body fat the least. I was still in amazing shape. And it was because I was doing all this other stuff. And I think
Hmm.
that's what led to like the Olympic lifting. And then I kept in that. And yes, so strength training for sure. Power training is
Hmm.
my favorite,
Yeah.
to
You had a
say the
lot of
least.
fun. You were
I
having
had
a
a lot
lot
of
of
fun.
fun. Yeah. And you were working with a coach as well yourself.
Yes. And I think that's why, not why, I obviously like strength training, but I think that's a big part that has come into my own coaching with my own clients is most of my female clients, we are working towards heavier strength training and like they tend to have a similar obsession growth.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
one of my ladies is definitely outlifting me by a lot, and she's only been
Wow.
strength training for like a year. She just genetically she is capable, and so it's just fun to watch them get through their first cycle, and then they're like, actually, like, I want to have more muscle and get stronger. Is that weird?
Yes.
And I'm like, that's not weird. Like, that's
Yeah.
why you stay. It's like
Right.
you come to lose body fat, but like a lot of my clients stay because they fall in love with the process. And I think
Right.
that is what's important. and a
Yeah.
lot of things are important, but that's what's important in my coaching.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what's important for just that lifestyle shift that we want our clients to make, right? Like that's what we want
Yeah.
for them. They may not want that for them when they first come.
They don't know it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I remember you saying once, like, I was like, oh, my back is really shaping up. Like, who knew that I wanted like a good back? And you were like, yeah, it's one of those things. Like, you never want it. But when you do, you're like, oh shit, look at my back. Let's keep doing
100%.
this. Yeah.
Yes. And so, yeah, I definitely feel like the shift of putting my programming and I think that's the other part. Then I had to eat for the amount of volume I was doing, which was like significantly higher than what I had been doing before. And so I learned a lot about nutrition in that way, in terms of how to eat to support your body more than how can I restrict to like make my body smaller. So I think those two came hand in hand for me, the Olympic lifting and then having to, and because you compete in weight classes too. So there was like shifting around or being comfortable at a heavier weight or all of that, which I feel like really helps my relationship with my body and ability.
So after Olympic lifting, at that time, is that when you got into management with Equinox?
Yeah.
And what were you doing then for training? Were you still Olympic lifting?
Yeah. So I would say, as you know, the first 6 months of managing at Equinox are really hard on your body.
Oh my goodness.
You're stressed. Any new job, and I don't want to say just Equinox, any new position that you take is good. There's going to be a lot of stress. You're just like, there's a learning curve. You're managing people. There's just a lot of variables. So I would say I wasn't getting very many lifts in. So that was like the hard part. Think I was at peak. Like I had competed in October in in a lower weight class. So I was like peak for me, like peak strength, size, all of that. And then I did have like an Achilles injury. So that like sucked timing wise. And then I went right to managing. So I feel like I wasn't getting a lot of lifts in. But once I got settled, then I did a mix, and I would work out with my trainers a lot. I had a group of trainers that like to lift together, and we would do strength and some Olympic lifting. And that was just nice accountability. And so then I got in a rhythm, probably about 6 to 8 months into managing, which is a long time. That's a long transition to get. And a lot of people, but I don't do well with transitions.
Yeah.
I like schedule, like I'm like routine. And so it takes me a minute.
Definitely.
Admittedly.
Yeah, totally. And I think it does for a lot of people. And I think that most people don't like change because it's like, well, what the hell? I'm very comfortable in what I'm doing. And, you and I have talked about this before. So you and I got into management right around the same time for Equinox. And we were like, this is going to be great. We're so
Best
excited. And like, there's definitely an element of feeling proud and excited to be in a management role and being able to contribute to the development of new trainers and to the success of a whole club. And so you and I totally, just our personalities, we dove in 110%. And I think that I know that I developed a whole new appreciation for what my corporate clients went through. And I know that you did too. Just, we went from being active trainers, moving all day, picking up weights, helping our clients, having time to exercise, going home early or whatever, coming back to work to, putting in 10, 12, 14-hour days, oftentimes sitting at a desk, and then also managing anywhere between 10 to 20 trainers. And so, yeah, new appreciation for people that sit at desks for a long time and don't have the time to exercise and train. And what was your experience like being a manager? Like, would you ever go back to corporate? And how did that impact, I guess, how you train your clients now too?
I think for the corporate answer, I think the answer is no. And nothing. Like, I just feel like, I think we both felt like this once we went on COVID. Well, I was on COVID. I think you maybe left Equinox before that. But I don't think I understood the amount of stress that I was holding from how many responsibilities I was managing until everyone took a collective breath-ish when we went in COVID, right? So I think that's when I became more aware of like how much I had actually had to load. And I think because I have the ability and have started my own business, I have no desire to go work for someone else again. Like I really do value getting to work under my own value system. And And it makes loving your work easier when you have the ability to say no to things. Because when you're doing corporate, you will do a lot of things you don't enjoy doing because they must be done, right? And in my business, like if I do something I don't want to be doing, it's because I agreed to do it.
Right.
Like that's on me. So I think the idea of corporate, unless I really just loved something or felt passionate about it, I don't think I would go back. What was your other question about that?
So my other question was, how did
How I train my clients. Well, I think the way for my really high level clients, in terms of like their work, I do a lot better at not only I've never, some trainers you can see that they're setting too high of expectations for their clients based on their load. I don't think I ever really had a big problem with that. What I feel like I am better at now is drawing light for them how they need to manage their own expectations. Like you were in London for a week, you got home on Sunday night, and you're trying to do a session at 8 a.m. on Monday morning. Like today is not going to be a 10 out of 10 workout day. Like we're going to move, we're going to roll, and we're going to feel good about it.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to feel guilt that you didn't come in and crush it today. It's like and like the education part, like your body literally is not prepared to crush today. Like think about your last week, think about your eating, think that you like how many client dinners and drinks you had. Like, and so I think drawing a lot more awareness for them and education around what they can expect of their body and how we can support their body when they're in these high seasons of stress and travel, which I probably would not have really fathomed or understood before I had worked that way.
I agree with you. And I think both of us, we came from more athletic backgrounds where it was like dance competition or dance practice or lacrosse practice. Like you just put your head down and did it, even if like you weren't 110% or you were injured, you managed that injury. And so when you start working with Gen Pop and you've come from sort of this experience of being an athlete, especially when you're a trainer in the first couple of years, you're just like, well, just like do it.
Just do it.
Just show up. And you're not showing up and you're not doing it, but you're telling them. So, but then, it gives you a bit more of perspective when you're actually in that culture, that routine, that lifestyle, and it humbles you and you're like, oh shit.
And I think this even applies because I think you probably do too. I work with a lot of moms now, like a lot. And I feel like these same principles, I think, really also heavily apply to like their workload and like the amount of things they're managing between working. A lot of them work full time and they're managing a household and their kiddos and all their things, and like helping them set realistic expectations for themselves. And like, how does taking care of yourself and all of this fit in to the parameters of your life? And like, when you think like, because especially if you were in your 20s, the last time you were in something and you were like, well, I used to work out 5 days a week and I used to like count all my food and I used to do it. It's like, well, that's not realistic anymore. So how can we come up with something that's realistic to like what's happening?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a big thing, a big area of growth, having had a lot of different busy schedules and trying to figure out how it works in for me on how to change your programming based on your life and the season that you're in.
I agree. That was definitely an eye-opening experience. I remember sitting at the computer for like, I don't know, the first like week or two, and then just being like so tight and be like, I have to do some T-spine openers to really lubricate my T-spine. And I'm just sitting at a desk all day. It's like, oh my God, this is insane. So you went from a small town in Kansas to this big city in LA, and I know you had a lot of eye-opening experiences, like work experience, growth within yourself, within your relationships, within your friendships, something that you probably wouldn't have ever gotten if you hadn't left Kansas. Right?
For sure. Yeah.
And so now you're back in Madison, and looking back on your time in LA, how long were you there for fully?
About 7 years.
Wow.
I know.
Who knew?
Oh, crazy.
What are like some of the biggest lessons that you would take away from your time there, whether it's about growth or experience, or we can even come back to it if you want to think about it?
That is a really big question. That's a really good question. No, it's a really good question. I think one of the specifically on work element, I think one of the big takeaways for me, and kind of really our trajectory with training, and then we both went into managing whatever. I think I learned a lot of lessons about what I'm really capable of handling and like that lesson of like, what am I capable of handling and doing at a super high level, but then trying to identify where I actually want to, like, what I want my life to look like. And I think it's
Mhm.
easy in LA and it's easy with social media to feel, and we've talked about this before because I've been doing a lot of soul search on this, but like to feel like because other people are doing it, that's what I should want. My company to be this size, or like
Mhm.
I I want to be the manager running 30 trainers and like having a super successful club, but like really like internally like what do I want? Like, do I want
Yes.
that? Or does like
Yeah.
the world tell us we want that? And so I think getting to experience a lot of different things and work and all of that in LA gave me the ability to like kind of know what's out there, quote unquote, right?
Yeah.
See the world and then really be able to identify now what do I want? So what can I take from like the experience I've had, but like the way I grew up and like living in Madison now and like build the life that I actually want. Right. And I
Mhm.
think if I hadn't had some of those experiences, maybe you'd wonder like, what's life like out there? You know,
Right.
like,
Right. Yeah.
I don't know what people think when they have it, but like, I've seen enough to know I've seen too much. Not,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that is like the biggest takeaway. And also that there were so many people doing jobs that I didn't even know existed before moving there. And I felt a really sense of empowerment to create something that I wanted to do.
Mhm.
Like not having to feel trapped and like
Yeah.
when I was graduating from high school, I was pretty much like, well, you could be a nurse or you could be a teacher or you could like I mean like there was not a lot of options that you thought
Yeah.
about, you know?
Yeah.
And like then I went out there and I'm like, you do what and get paid? Like,
Yeah.
what?
What?
So anyway, felt a lot of empowerment then to build something that I felt like was going to provide for my family, yes, but also really be my strengths and passions and throw those together,
Mhm.
which has been wonderful.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up, and we've talked about that before about like, do we want this? Do we want this great, grandiose, like big life, or are we gonna be okay with the simple
It
life
was like,
versus
yeah, it
like
was something
the
like an extraordinary life or an ordinary life.
yes.
Um, and I think it comes like with just like life or like what we talk about sometimes even with like body fat percentage of bodies, it's like everything comes at a cost, right? So if you want the extraordinary life or body or whatever, it's like it comes with a lot of sacrifice. And I think we have to decide what willing of sacrifice of other things we're willing to give. In terms of relationships, really, I think is a huge sacrifice, I think, a lot when we work a lot or
Yeah, because I remember working for Equinox and making more money than I ever had in my time in LA and thinking, wow, this is great, but I also am not happy, right? I physically and emotionally am not happy in my work environment. I don't have 2 days off in a row. I've lost,
huge.
15 pounds from stress and
And I
working
gained
so
15
much.
pounds my first 6 months. We had very different experience.
We had a different experience.
The same but different.
Same. But like, yeah, you're like, I'm gonna have a whiskey and coke today to top off the night. And I'm like, well, I didn't eat for 14 hours today. So now I'm gonna have like rice cakes and peanut butter and chocolate chips for dinner and go to bed. I think for you coming back to Madison, like it's kind of brought you full circle with your husband and finding a career and a job path and a career path that feels meaningful to you and kind of becoming more comfortable with the idea of like what you really want and what you truly want, right? Whether it's extraordinary or ordinary, doesn't we don't have to give it that designation, but it is like you're finding your happy place, you're finding that serenity within your life, which a lot of people like spend their whole lives trying to find, and
Yeah.
trying to figure out what they want to do or strive for. And obviously there's going to be periods where you're like, all right, regroup, or like, are we,
Yeah.
changing course, or like what's happening? But yeah, I think being in LA, there was a lot of pressure, so much pressure. The physical pressure of looking a certain way, the pressure of, are you making enough money? Are you having a big enough impact? Are you doing something that's cool enough, meaningful enough, like trendy enough? Who do you know? What do you do? What do you
Yeah.
drive? So I'm definitely happy I got out of there. There's definitely this nostalgia of like how cool
Yeah.
California is and being in the mountains and then being in the ocean and then having the palms and just being in like a very cool state. But you can get lost, in
Yeah.
terms of like yourself.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I definitely like loved our time there. And I think one of the things I appreciated that I really missed when I got here is like, it's a curse and a blessing because I feel like in LA, people are talking about inner peace or whatever, but it's like no one's trying to stay the same. Everybody is chasing something, growing. Like you walk out your door and like 10 people are jogging. Like it's like
Mm-hmm.
everyone is moving forward there. And so like even by like osmosis, I feel like you just get like pulled. Like
Yes.
what's next? Where am I going? Which is honestly for my 20, like that was a really good place to be. And that like I felt like we've talked about this. We had like exponential personal growth and career growth in a very short amount of time. And then sometimes you go to a place where there's not that, and you're like, oh, like I got to create that for myself. Like,
Yeah.
yikes! Like, ah, which it can be a struggle. So
Yeah.
I appreciated that, but then I also feel like it's easy to feel like you're never like okay with just being okay.
Right.
Like
Exactly. Or like on the flip side of that, like, can you just be okay with being
being okay.
as is for a second, for like 1 minute?
Yeah, and I feel like the answer was no for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
So
both of
let's
us.
talk
Yeah.
about that. So you were in LA for 7 years, and then during COVID, you and your husband moved back to Madison, Kansas, or rather Kansas City and then Madison. The transition, and you and I have talked about this, was a bit challenging. And naturally, going from a big city, having a like close group of friends and a community of work, and really where you kind of like a very formidable time in your life as you got into fitness and really figured out what you wanted to do. What was like the first year or two like back in Madison? What were some of the things that you fell right back into and were like, this is great, I feel at home? And what were some of the elements, you just touched on one, like growth and pushing forward and self-development, that felt a little bit more like, was this the right move, or am I going to flourish here? Is this going to work out?
So, and then like just like a brief little backstory, we had pit stopped in Kansas City, like you mentioned, and we had planned on being there for a couple of years. And then my husband was offered a job back here, where our hometown, and with like potential kids on the horizon or what, we just felt like there's not a lot of jobs to be had in a town of 600 people. So like we just felt like if we were ever going to be in Madison, he wasn't going to get an opportunity like this again for work. And so it kind of like sped up our timeline by years. And so that is pursued this whole series of events. We rented, we bought a house, we moved. So we moved like 3 times in 7 months. Like, and then we got settled, and I like had like emotional whiplash. Like,
Yeah.
bam! I'm like, why? Like, what did we just do? Kind of thing. And so I feel like I had to kind of like get on board retroactively, which is not my personality. Usually I overplan and like whatever. So yeah. So I think that there was hard in a lot of fronts in a time of transition, which I've already admitted are very hard for me in general, losing routine, whatever. That's a time that I felt like I really would have leaned on my fitness and professional community. Like when you work in a gym, you have so many people that are just like on your team. Like they're on your side, they're motivating you, like you're grabbing workouts with people. And I feel like that's a time I really could have used that. But I was in a town that at that time had no fitness community of any kind. And not to say people weren't working out. It's just like here, everyone's like struggling alone in their basement. Like the closest gym is like 25 miles away. And so I feel like I struggled with my own fitness during that time. And because I had left, I moved pretty much right after college. I hadn't lived here since I was 18. So you know everyone, but at the same time, like you don't really know them anymore because you both have lived 10 years, 12 years of life. So you're kind of slowly trying to like get to know people again. Cause like a girl you graduated, like she's married, she's got 3 kids. Like she's lived a whole season and everyone's busy. So it's not like, my kids, I don't have kids. So it's not like we're like popping into like the little basketball game or
Yeah.
something. So I feel like I had to really like, it took time, I think, to reconnect. The things that I fell right back into was like our families. Like I have extended family here. Josh has extended family here. And so I feel like that was like amazing because we spent many years away from our families, only coming home for holidays. And we missed a lot of things that we would have liked to be here for. So that part was great. Getting used to what life was going to look like though was hard. Where do I work out? Like at dealing with like weather, like things you don't deal with in LA. Like it's like 30 degrees. So like walking out my door and going for a walk is no longer an option. Like, so I just finding a new relationship with fitness under my new constraints, essentially.
And so what advice would you give to someone who is transitioning to an area that they're brand new to, they don't have a community, there's no gym close by, or maybe they're not comfortable in the gym, like what's maybe one or two things that you would advise for them?
One main thing is find something that you can be a part of, even if it's something you're not interested in. I grew up in the church, but like we hadn't been consistently going to church like while we were in LA. Like we did stuff. I went to church when I came home, but like it wasn't a huge part of our life. But like that's something that I feel like I fell back into really easily.
Hmm.
But it was honestly too like outside of like your own faith journey. For me, it was a great way to like spend time with people. And like I joined a
Hmm.
women's small group, even though I was like, I didn't necessarily want to be in a small group, but I don't know anybody. So I did that. And it honestly was wonderful. And I got like a
Yeah.
ton out of it. And I'm so glad I did it. And I've done more since. So I would say finding something that there is, and a lot of times in a small community, if it is a small community, it doesn't have to be, but if it is a small community, those things do tend to revolve around the school or church. So if there's
Hmm.
something that you can volunteer for at the school or whatever, I think that's a great way to meet people because that's really how the lives turn here.
And to your point, it's another community, right? It's people that have a common goal or a common interest.
Hmm.
They're coming together, they're supporting you, you're talking about stuff. And sometimes I feel like I remember growing up and not being religious and being like, I wish I was, in a way. Like I wish that I
Hmm.
had not necessarily a religion, but something that I could look to help ground me and guide me. And since then I've
Yeah.
created my own sort of spiritual connectedness and practice. But I always remember almost feeling jealous of other people who had such connection to their faith and their church and their community and something to go back to, and kind of like, "Ugh, I want that." Like they seem like so happy, and so they can rely on something each
Hmm.
week, almost like, to
Yeah.
help them. So I think that's a great piece of advice. And I've given similar advice, and like join a meetup group or go find a
Yes.
hiking group or a walking group. Or it's awkward at first, like, yes, no one knows each other, you're going to be the newbie, but you have to put yourself out there in some way in order to just like see who's out there. Like you're not going to be friends with all 10 people, but maybe two, right? Or one, you grab a coffee afterwards, and it just starts from there.
Yeah. And I think that too, like it really is like having something that feels intentional because I mean, I think my friends say this about dating these days. It's like, it's just hard sometimes to like meet people in the wild. Like
Yeah.
people have lives. They're literally popping in to grab their coffee and leaving. Like you're not just like serendipitously like meeting your best friend at a coffee shop anymore. Like just like, oh, I just met her
Yeah.
one day. It's like, it's not happening and it's not happening as frequently. So I do feel like you have to put yourself into a group that feels intentional so that you can actually spend enough time with people to get to know if you want to have something more than that.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you're enjoying the podcast, it would mean so much to me if you took less than 2 minutes to give us 5 stars and submit a quick review. Your feedback helps other women who are looking for help with their cravings and fat loss goals find us more easily and benefit from the free content we share. Thank you so much. It truly means a lot. So you moved back to Madison, and then Molly Buster coaching kind of took off, right? And that's really when you started dedicating a little bit more time. And you had still started it in LA, but it was more
Mm-hmm.
coming to fruition when
Yeah.
you got into Kansas. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I had started it. We moved out of LA in December of 2020, and I had just started. I mean, I started it kind of right around that time, November. Just and I. My thought when I moved to Kansas City was, when we get there, I'll get a part-time job because, like, I didn't know, like, anyway, and thankfully and awesomely, like that never happened. Like, business was good and took off and like has continued. So that's been great. But yes, then kept building that. And when I moved to Madison, because I do coach predominantly online, right? I thought, it's a town of 600 people in the middle of nowhere. Like I grew up here. Like I know the vibe. I was like, I'll never have any clients in Madison. Like I thought I was like, I'll never train anyone in Madison. And I have been blown away by how many people and women I've worked with like here, like, and I just think Midwest gets like this, like, oh, Midwest, like unhealthy lifestyle, whatever. And I don't think it's for a lack of caring. It's like a lack of resources, really.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
just like I meant, like, you have one of my moms, like, has 3 kids, like, she didn't have time to drive 25 miles 3 times a week there and back just to work out. You just have
Mhm.
different constraints, and I think people haven't known how to work on or had support or community or a professional living in their community. And
Mhm.
so anyway, that just turned in. So I do have all my online clients, but I've trained several women here and the surrounding areas, even if they're not in my community, they're in small communities close to me, which I just did not anticipate. I did not have, and it's been
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
It is awesome. It is awesome. And it's one of the reasons I wanted you to be on the podcast is because, in an effort to get fitness and health out to like everyone at some point in their life, like I think it's so important what you're doing. And I think you kind of just fell into it in a way. You like weren't expecting it. And then you were like, well, look at all these women that are just like so eager and interested in learning and wanting to feel good in their bodies again. And now you've created this community in a way, like you've established it and you've helped women see that it is possible to take care of yourself, still have a family, still work, still provide, still do all the small town stuff that you might want to do, but you can still also show up for yourself. So who do you work with mostly, like within your company, Molly Buster Coaching, and how can they work with you? How can they find you? Yeah, tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. So I work mainly with women in their 30s to 70s, really. But I would say the bulk of my clients are 30 to 50 that are post kids or in the middle of kids that are trying to learn how to lift weights and what nutrition should look like for them now. And
Mm-hmm.
that's who I work with mostly. And what I try a lot of times, as we know, like sometimes we have like a specific plan and stuff, which is good. I really do try to take a picture of their life and then we fit very specific things into that. So, what I recommend for Melissa is going to be different than what I recommend for Nicole.
Mm-hmm.
And their programming reflects a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone wants to find me, they can just find me on Instagram, Molly Buster Coaching.
Awesome. And so you talked earlier about lack of resources, and I'm sure that also applies to nutrition and access to food, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how have you helped women shift more towards whole food nutrition or nutrient dense nutrition? Do you find that there's lack of resources for that in small towns, or is it more a lack of knowledge how to prepare these foods, how to utilize these, like implement these foods within their day to day? Where is the disconnect there?
I think a lot of it is um, twofold. I think a lot of times in Midwest diets, and this is American diets in general, but like here, like when I think about like if you're trying to provide for someone's family, you like cook them a casserole, right? So it's like when
Mm-hmm.
you're thinking, and so a lot of I think the coaching for these women specifically comes around portions. Like we might call it a macro split, but for them, like on your plate or in your day, how can we increase your protein overall? Protein is like the big part, and the benefit of working with women that grow up in this community is like we're not afraid of meat.
Yeah.
Most of their
Nice.
most families here are buying a half cow and put it in their deep freeze. Like so that's good because they're not afraid to push into that a little bit more. But because of this like casserole family style, it's just the portions and the ratios are all out of
Mhm.
whack. So that's what we
Mhm.
focus on a lot is the ratios. And then also here, most families, you drive to the nearest Walmart or Aldi's once a week and you buy all your groceries for the week, which means the fresh food you're bringing home is significantly less and it's a lot more seasonal here. Like, you might go and you're like, none of this lettuce is good today. And
Yeah.
you're like, I can't get lettuce today. Like,
Yeah.
and so when they do buy, it's like, what am I going to eat in the next 2 days, 3 days? And then you might be utilizing more like frozen broccoli and stuff later in the week for simplicity and so that it
Got it.
keeps. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
that kind of like food
Mhm.
ideas for this kind of
Mhm.
cooking, but then how should my overall like plate look really?
Yeah. That's really interesting that coming from these small towns requires even another layer of like personalization and individualization in terms of access to food and access to a gym or equipment, right? Cuz even if women are ordering barbells or dumbbells, that takes a little bit of time to get out there,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Unless you're ordering it from like a local Walmart or something.
Yeah. And I think there's a couple of my clients, which has been fun, like their husbands or them as a couple had already created a garage gym because they
Nice.
didn't want to drive. So like this fight, you get a little sub because more people have more land and
Yeah.
outbuildings. You end up with a few more garage gyms than you do in LA, which is good.
Nice. That's awesome.
So that's been good as well. And sometimes I create like one of my women, she works close to a gym, but then she has to drive home and be a mom and all of that. And so her workouts are all lunch break workouts that are short because
There
that's
we
what we
go.
know can fit in. Yeah.
Nice. So I know you and I have worked with a lot of women who initially come to us with like a lot of fat loss goals, right?
Hmm.
Wanting to be super lean and strong sometimes, or toned, or whatever it might be. And oftentimes they're giving us these pictures or images of like body fat percentages and body size and physique that, to what we were talking about before, requires a certain amount of restriction, compromise, and sacrifice, right? Sacrifice. And so how do you walk someone through like, okay, this is maybe what you're looking for, right? But this is kind of like what you're able to kind of get to, or not what you're able to get to, but rather how do you communicate that to them? Like, this is going to require a certain amount of sacrifice, and you're not necessarily going to be able to give that, or do you think you're going to be able to give that?
Yeah. I think I have been blessed, I guess, lately that the more of the women I'm working with, I would say might be a little further away than our like social media picture that someone might give, like they're like at more of the, let's say, the beginning stage of their journey. They've been out of it for a minute. So I feel like for me, that conversation happens like later in our relationship, which I'm like really grateful for, because also by that point, they have changed their nutrition enough to know that changing your nutrition is work.
Yeah.
And so then when you do really communicate, like, and for some of these people listening, like if you're talking about someone in a bikini or on a like bikini competition show where they're like have super lean abs and like no body fat, like they are tracking any morsel of food that goes in their body. They're weighing everything. They're working out 6 days a week. A lot of times they're doing like fasted cardio. Like it's a huge commitment. And we see it online and we're like, oh, I should be able to diet. And I would just
Yeah.
look like that. Like I'll
Yeah.
just like cut a few things and work out 3 times a
Yeah.
week and I'll just look like that. But it's not. And that's just like a misconception about it. Just a lack of knowledge. So I think once someone has made enough changes, and that's felt like a little bit of work and they've had some progress and you're like, okay, but like this is what it would be like to take that next step, then they're able to really weigh like we were talking about before, like how much do I want this, especially when they're in this like family life, like how much do I want to interrupt my life but also my family's life nutritionally
Mm-hmm.
for an extra 10 pounds, or like if I was going to try to compete or something, because then I feel like they're able to take that knowledge a little more than when it's your very first assessment call.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. They've warmed up to you a little bit. They're like, okay, we've
And
got
they
some skin
trust
in the
you,
game. Like, yeah,
you know.
exactly. Exactly. So I know personally for myself, I used to really want abs. I used to really want abs because I never had them and I always had a little bit more weight around my belly.
Mm-hmm.
And now I could like give a shit about like my body fat percentage.
Yeah.
And even my weight, like my highest, like whatever, 150, 155 sometimes. My leanest at like when I was at Equinox and not eating was like 138. And how I looked, I was like, I had abs, right? But I've gotten to this point where I don't put as much like emphasis on the scale or even how I look. Like for me, it's more about showing up, exercising, and making sure that I'm eating the right foods. And for me, like the win is like not having the episodes of, the monthly binges
Yeah.
on my period, not overeating sugar and crap at night, having a really much healthier relationship with food. And so that's shifted a lot for me. I think also because I saw what it was going to take to be that lean and I wasn't able to do it
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know why. I think I just like food too much and I like my treat foods and I like to be able to go out and have cocktails and I like to be able to like have pizza with my boyfriend if I want to, right? And so I knew that
Yes.
that lifestyle wasn't going to be able to get me that. In my head, like the athletic mindset, I'm like, well, I wasn't disciplined enough, right? I wasn't disciplined enough. I didn't want it enough. And if I'm being honest, yeah, I didn't want it enough, right? Because if I wanted it and I was okay giving up the pizza and the alcohol and the carbs or whatever it might be, then I would be able to get that. But I guess for you, and you and I we went through similar challenges around our nutrition when we were both in LA. We were really good during the week. We exercised a lot. We burned all the calories. We showed up, we strength trained. And then I remember our Friday happy hours would kind of kick off the week. And we, at Stout Burger, we would get our happy hour burger and our happy hour beers.
Remember
and that
when you'd always ask me to share the fries and I'd be like, no.
You're like, I worked out. I'm getting my own fries. Oh my God. Yes. We would work out and then we would go straight to happy hour across the street. And that would start our weekend of like binge drinking and overeating.
Food and drinking, yeah.
Yeah. And then Monday would start all over and, we'd be hungover like for 2 more days. And then we have maybe 2 good days. So, we chase the scale, we chase the aesthetics for a really long time. And so I know you've gotten to a place of more like performance as well and more body acceptance. And like, what was it for you? Was it realizing the sacrifice it would take? Was it focusing more on performance goals with Olympic lifting? Was it moving back to Madison and being like, this stuff's important to me, this family stuff, this enjoying food, celebrating and not having to restrict? What was it for you?
Yeah, I think a couple of those things. I think the performance element for sure helped significantly, and I'll come back to that in a second. And then I also think mainly now, and to say that I never feel like I want to be a little leaner to me, I think what's most important to me now is that I just feel good and comfortable. Like, right. Like, it's like, I feel like I have fluctuated enough, like not even necessarily on the scale, but like just how like my clothes fit. Like I know when I feel comfortable, and as long as I'm staying around there and it's not super lean either for me, then I feel good. Like I want to feel like I can put on shorts in the summer and feel comfortable and confident. And I feel like how comfortable and confident I feel is directly related to my performance in the gym. Like if I am lifting, and it's secular because like one, you just feel more confident and stuff when you're lifting heavy shit all the time. But also because of how my body and genetics work, and many women and just people in general, lifting heavy and more frequently gives me more flexibility nutritionally and just keeps me at a more stable place. So I feel like it's all secular for me. When I'm crushing and doing good, my body's usually responding and I feel good. And I just and then the minute my workouts start to tap off, my body, I don't have the genetics that I can just do nothing and have flexibility and think my body's going to stay the same, So, so it's very secular for me. The other thing, like when we were talking about how we talk to our clients, I think there's a big other realization I had. And like when you were kind of talking about like just where you felt like you naturally hold weight, I think a big thing for me also to communicate is like really just taking a look at your natural shape and your natural genetics. And like, how can we make you as a person happy, confident in your body, the constraints of your body? I can never, I'm 5'3" and I'm like all butt and legs. Like I can't ever be like, I wish I looked like Kendall Jenner. Like it's never going to happen. But if I can like look at someone with a similar body shape, like I'm never going to have leg striations. I don't care how like lean I am. Like, I might have abs more often, but like legs, like I'm always going to have cellulite and things like that. And I'd become okay with that because like this is a constraint to my body. I'm not going to start wishing for things that like I literally would have to like kill myself to get. Like why don't we work with what's working? Like let's double down on what our bodies like were made to do. Like my body was made to lift a lot of heavy things and responds well to that. Some of my clients respond well to a different stimulus, and that's okay. I think that's a big thing too. I think.
Yeah. I agree with you.
Be a realist with what's happening.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a big part of it too. I leaned more into the realism of it. Like instead of objectifying or like glamorizing this look that I wanted, I had to be honest with myself and like look at my mom and look at my grandparents. I'm like, all right, we all got bellies. We all got the Italian little belly that, the extra 5-10 pounds that like our body's comfortable at. If I really want to diet down, I could probably lose it. But that's going to be like a little bit more restriction for me, you know? I've got the thighs, I got the ass, and just leaning into that more, exactly what you said of like kind of accepting my body shape, my body size. It was almost like a breath of fresh air, and I could just kind of like be like almost relax and be like,
Yeah.
okay, there's a reason for this. Like, oh, it's genetics. Cool. Awesome. I think that's definitely a huge part of it too.
And I think there's something too. I kind of, you can see whatever you want to see on social media, but some people are like, stop blaming your genetics. Like you see this from trainers sometimes, but I'm like, and I get like people will find excuses in anything, but like genetics is a real deal. Like if you
Yes.
look at your entire family and everyone is what you would consider like big boned or whatever, like just any trait that you can think of, chances are you probably are too, like
Mm-hmm.
at your
Mm-hmm.
core, like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like super grateful. Dad, sometimes my dad in the Midwest is like, you don't need to lift that heavy, like doing whatever. But like my dad, like pound for pound, was also always super strong. Like
Mm.
growing up and like lifting
Yeah.
weights, he always had like what he was lifting at his body weight, and I'm like, you can't give me this power and be like, don't use
Yeah.
it. Like,
Don't use
like, where
it.
do you think I got it?
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Your dad used to exercise?
Well, you play football here, so yes, he grew up playing football. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think if you haven't exercised your whole life and you haven't eaten as healthy, then your genetics are going to play an even greater part in
Sure.
how your body looks, right? And it's going to be maybe
Mhm.
a little bit harder in those later years to quote unquote, don't blame genetics, or whatever people
Right.
are saying. But let's be honest, some people are more genetically quote unquote gifted, and some
Yeah, I mean,
people,
we all know that one person that eats whatever they want and are the size of your pinky. Like they exist. Like it
yeah.
happens, and that's why I think like the comparison is a thief of joy. Like I think that with like genetics, but also with like what you can eat and what works well for you and what ratios and like the balance you've found like might not work for me or in
Yes.
the same, like it's going to have to be tailored to me. And like we're trying to find what's best for your body, and not eat what so and so's thinking or lift how they're lifting and think it's going to
Mm-hmm.
magically just be the pill for you. Like it
Yeah.
has to be shifted or tailored some. We know certain things work, obviously. There are key things that help everyone, but like, yeah, just because she posts ice cream on her Instagram every day, like doesn't mean you can eat ice cream and get away with it every day, unfortunately.
And is she even eating ice cream every day? Social media.
Oh,
I
I hate it.
know.
I hate it. I can talk about it. And I tell someone, it's like, well, she eats it every day. I'm like, guaranteed she doesn't eat it every day.
I remember seeing someone, she has a sister on Instagram, and the sister took a video of her, like she was like going for a hike in the blah blah blah, and she was like in a golf course or something. Like she's like, my sister's not going for a hike, she's just posting this for Instagram. And then she like got called out by her sister. But anyway, we could get into social
Yes,
media as like a whole other thing.
I digress.
Yes. Thank you so much for being on. Before we hop off, I want to ask you, I like to end the podcast with like, what is your favorite Crave food? Like, what's your favorite yum yum food? Like the thing that will provide the comfort or that satisfaction for you at the end of the night or the weekend.
You're gonna like laugh so hard.
I know
It
what
was
it is. I think
always,
I know what it
well,
is.
I hope you do. It was always ice cream. When we were in LA, it was always ice cream. That was my cheat. Like the Haagen-Dazs, like so good. Cookie dough. Okay. But I really like as I've changed and had a different relationship, like I not don't have as much of a sweet tooth anymore. Like I don't, if I tried to eat that, like it would make me like not feel good to that degree anyway. That amount.
Yeah. Still have
So
some.
my like Crave food is 100% the jalapeno Cheetos, which have probably 0%.
Oh my God. Really?
Yes.
I haven't even had those. I didn't know those existed.
It's probably best you don't. There. Anyway, it's definitely my cheat food, and it has 0 nutritional value.
Great.
But after I talk about all like if I like been a long week and I like want to like Josh was like, "Will bring me home some jalapeno Cheetos."
Yay. I love that. I need to find those and try them out.
Yeah, dangerous.
Yeah. We can have foods that have no nutritional value in them.
100%.
Yeah.
Live a little. You just can't live all the time. That's what I tell my clients.
Exactly. I like that. We'll have that on the podcast as like in the description.
Perfect.
Well, thanks for being on, Molly, and I can't wait to have you back on the show. See you soon.